जबरदस्ती नहीं करवाते, हमने सड़कों पे होना है। तशद्दुद पे जो उकसाया जा रहा है, ये एक सिविल वॉर की तरफ जो है मुल्क को ले जाया जा रहा है।
Is Pakistan sliding towards a civil war? Ever since Imran Khan was ousted from power, he has been mobilizing his supporters. Why? Because he wants snap polls. He continues to claim his ouster was the result of a foreign conspiracy, and he is not backing down. So much so that his actions might be pulling Pakistan towards full-fledged civil unrest. Two lawmakers from rival political parties are saying this could happen. On Gravitas tonight, we tell you how the change of guard in Pakistan has triggered fresh instability and why the instability could be here to stay. And with its economy nosediving, this is not the trajectory the country can afford to be on right now. We tell you why. So is Pakistan heading towards a civil war, a war between the citizens of the country? I know this may sound alarmist, but Pakistan's own lawmakers are warning about how the country could be heading towards full-fledged civil unrest. Lawmakers from both ends of the political spectrum have been saying this. Before I get to what they have said, let me first give you a sense of the situation on the ground. Imran Khan might be out of power, but he is not backing down. The ousted Prime Minister has hit the streets. He is rallying people against the establishment, threatening to paralyze the entire country. This is what he said on the 13th of April.
अपने पाकिस्तानियों आप सबको आज पैगाम देना चाहता हूं कि आपने जब तक इलेक्शन का ये गवर्नमेंट अनाउंस नहीं करती, जब तक हम इलेक्शन इनसे जबरदस्ती नहीं करवाते, हमने सड़कों पे होना है, हमने मुजाहरे करने हैं.
And 3 days later, on the 16th of April, these visuals emerged. They showed mayhem inside the Punjab Assembly. Lawmakers from Imran Khan's party, PTI, and its allied parties clashed with members of the PMLN, Shehbaz Sharif's party. They even roughed up the Assembly's deputy speaker. Have a look. And then we have the Pakistan Army. For all its claims of being united, there are divisions emerging within its ranks. Reports claim certain factions within the Pakistan Army have extended their support to Imran Khan. Which factions are these? So far, the fingers are being pointed at the Peshawar Corps and its commander, Lieutenant General Faiz Hamid, the man that Imran Khan tried to retain as the ISI chief. Reports say that Lieutenant General Hamid continues to push buttons and strategize for Imran Khan from Peshawar. Some Pakistani analysts even claim that he plans to succeed General Bajwa as Pakistan's next chief of army staff. Now, what does all of this tell you? Never in its tumultuous history has Pakistan seen such political aerobatics. There is no indication that this will be short-lived either. More trouble is on its way, and we are not the ones saying this. Like I said, Pakistan's own lawmakers are warning that the country could be sliding towards full-fledged civil unrest. Lawmakers from both sides, that is the ruling Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz and the ousted Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. Let me now tell you who these lawmakers are. This is Khwaja Mohammad Asif, currently a member of the National Assembly from the PMLN. He says Pakistan is on a path towards destruction, that Imran Khan is taking the country towards a civil war. Watch this.
3.5-4 साल जो तबाही हुई है इस मुल्क की,
और अभी भी तबाही के रास्ते के ऊपर जो है इसको ले जाया जा रहा है, हमारे वतन को, हमारी कौम को, हमारी सोसाइटी को। और तशद्दुद की जो दावत दी जा रही है, तशद्दुद पे जो उकसाया जा रहा है, ये एक सिविल वॉर की तरफ जो है मुल्क को ले जाया जा रहा है।
And then we have Fawad Chaudhry, the former Information and Broadcasting Minister. He also has made the same assertion. Look at this tweet. He says, and I'm quoting, "We are inches away from full-fledged civil unrest. Imran Khan exercised utmost restraint. Very soon, even he will not be able to stop this angry mob. We will see the country plunging into civil unrest." And then we have PTI dissidents like Dost Mohammad Mazari, the current Deputy Speaker of the Punjab Assembly. He has issued the exact same warning that Imran Khan is trying to create a civil war-like situation. Now, here's the thing. Every time a Pakistani Prime Minister has been ousted, he or she has gone on to issue threats of civil unrest. Most of them ended up getting jailed, exiled, even assassinated. So there is reason to be skeptical here. At the same time, one cannot downplay Imran Khan's threats. He is, after all, the creator of dharna politics in Pakistan. Before he was Prime Minister, he was famous for orchestrating mass strikes and paralyzing government institutions across Pakistan. Right now, he is applying the same techniques. He has unleashed a populist campaign to return to office in the next election. He wants to mobilize a popular movement that would disrupt the new government's functioning. Are his efforts bearing fruit? It certainly seems like it. Thousands are turning up at his rallies. And no, they're not just ordinary Pakistanis. They are people from all walks of life. Activists, journalists, actors, models, filmmakers. Over the weekend, Imran Khan held a jalsa in Karachi, a rally to drum up support for snap polls. It was attended by a number of Pakistani A-listers like Saira Yusuf, Harun Shahid, filmmaker Aman Ahmad, Shan Shaheed, Rohel Hayat. These are all Pakistan's top celebrities protesting in favor of Imran Khan. To put it simply, if it is a civil war that Imran Khan wants, then his efforts may just succeed. He may be down, but he's not out. What about Shehbaz Sharif, the new Prime Minister? Well, he has decided to not speak about Imran Khan. Instead, he is focusing on holding on to power. He has finally announced a 34-member cabinet. They were sworn in on Tuesday morning. Who all are a part of the cabinet? There is Khwaja Mohammad Asif. He is the new Minister for Energy. And then we have Ehsan Iqbal Chaudhry. He is the Minister for Planning and Development. Next is Rana Sana Ullah Khan. He has been named the Interior Minister. Sardar Ayaz Sadiq is the new Minister for Economic Affairs. Mariam Aurangzeb is the new Information and Broadcasting Minister. And Hina Rabani Khar has been named the MOS for Foreign Affairs. These were just a few names. There are many more, but they are yet to be assigned portfolios. Plus, whether they will even get a chance to serve in these profiles depends on what happens in the country next. If it indeed slips into a civil war, everything could go for a toss. Meanwhile, Pakistan is hosting a guest today. Some of you may know her. Her name is Ilhan Omar. She is a US congresswoman with a well-known anti-India bias. Omar is reportedly flying all the way down to Pakistan. What's on her agenda? We are not sure. Reports say Omar will be meeting the Pakistani leadership. She will also be visiting Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Now, we have some questions for Congresswoman Omar. Will she condemn Pakistan's atrocities in Gilgit-Baltistan? Will she talk about the state of minorities in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir? If Omar's past record is anything to go by, the answer to these questions is a big no. On Twitter, Ilhan Omar brags about fighting for a more just world. But her view of the world seems to be colored with bias and religious linearity. In her view, the 9/11 attacks are quote-unquote some people doing something. In her dictionary, the massacre of Armenian Christians by the Turks is not a genocide. But India's rollout of the National Register of Citizens in Assam is reportedly the same as Myanmar's Rohingya genocide, according to her. Or some passengers singing Christian songs on a plane, anti-Muslim, according to her. Take a look at this video. Do you see anything wrong here? Ilhan Omar finds this conduct problematic. 2 days ago, she tweeted, and I'm quoting, "I think my family and I should have a prayer session next time I am on a plane. How do you think it will end?" Ilhan Omar is a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, but it seems her understanding of foreign affairs is unflattering, and so is her obsession with India. In 2019, Ilhan Omar accused India of hate crimes against Muslims. When India abrogated Article 370, this congresswoman had a problem then as well. She called for the restoration of quote-unquote democratic norms and religious freedom. She also had a lot to say against India's rollout of the NCR, or the National Register of Citizens in Assam. I'm quoting, "At what point do we question whether Prime Minister Modi shares our values?" quote unquote. This is what she asked. In 2019, she tweeted this Times article, "What's happening right now in India is tragic," quote unquote, particularly for the country's roughly 200 million Muslims. In 2021, Omar introduced a bill clubbing India along with China and Myanmar and accused New Delhi of atrocities against Muslims. A few days ago, Ilhan Omar was found pushing the Biden administration to quiz India on alleged human rights violations. Listen in to what Omar said.
Why has the Biden administration been so reluctant to criticize Modi's government on human rights? What will it take? How much does the Modi administration have to criminalize the act of being Muslim in India for us to say something? And I ask you again, what will it take for us to outwardly criticize the actions that the Modi administration is taking against its Muslim minorities in India?
Ilhan Omar is clearly not a fan of India or the Indian leadership, and she is entitled to her opinion. But it becomes a problem when a lawmaker abuses her position to push an agenda, or when she sells her anti-India agenda as human rights advocacy. Will Omar also raise human rights issues in Pakistan? Will she talk about the plight of those living in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir? How they are not allowed to speak their mother language or their traditional clothes or practice their customs? Will Ilhan Omar talk about the plight of Shias in Pakistan, the plight of Hazaras, Ahmadiyas, Balochis? Will Ilhan Omar shine light on Pakistan's blasphemy law, talk about how nearly 1,900 people have been charged under the archaic law since 1987? And while she is at that, Ilhan Omar could also highlight the violence against women and girls in Pakistan. Tell the world how nearly 1,000 women are killed because of quote-unquote honor every year in the country. She could talk about forced conversions, child marriage in Pakistan. Now that will make her a true human rights advocate, an advocate for a just world. When Omar was elected to the House of Representatives in 2019, she was celebrated as a progressive lawmaker. Omar, after all, had made history. She was one of the first Muslim women to be elected to the House. She was also the first Somali American. Omar grew up in a refugee camp. Her election came with a promise of hope. There was so much she could do with the mandate. There were so many real issues she could raise, so many American issues she could raise. But Ilhan Omar never failed to disappoint. And here is one of the issues she could talk about, the lynchings in Pakistan. A Pakistani court today sentenced 6 people to death for lynching a Sri Lankan national last year. 9 convicts have received life sentences, but this verdict may not act as an effective deterrence because extremist groups are fueling these angry mobs in the country. Our next report tells you why they are a threat. 3rd December 2021. A mob surrounded this factory in Pakistan's Sialkot. Their target was a Sri Lankan national. His name was Priyantha Kumara. Kumara worked inside this factory. This mob went after him. They stormed inside, they attacked Kumara and beat him up, dragged out his body and set it on fire. Why was Priyantha Kumara lynched? He was accused of blasphemy. It was alleged that Kumara desecrated posters of Prophet Muhammad. 4 months later, the attackers have been punished. An anti-terrorism court in Pakistan pronounced the verdict. 6 members of the lynch mob have been sentenced to death. 9 others will serve a life sentence. Over 800 people participated in the lynching. The lynching of Priyantha Kumara was not an isolated incident. Pakistan has frequently witnessed lynchings over perceived offences to Islam. In recent years, there has been an alarming rise in such incidents. Thanks to extremist political parties like the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan or TLP, the TLP calls itself the defender of Prophet Muhammad's honour. This is the same group that brought the Imran Khan government to its knees last year. It organised a massive protest and blocked routes towards Islamabad. TLP supporters were part of the same mob that killed Kumara. They were inspired by one of the slogans of the TLP. It literally means kill the blasphemers of the Prophet. The brother of Priyantha Kumara did not hesitate in blaming the TLP for the lynching.
No, the terrorist organization also they call some organization 1 year that banned by government. Now recently that opened that they removed that ban.
The incendiary rhetoric of parties like the TLP is now the driving force behind lynchings and vigilante attacks. And Pakistan's controversial blasphemy laws give such extremist groups a cover. In the past 7 decades, vigilante attacks have taken the lives of 90 civilians. More than 1,400 have faced blasphemy accusations, both in the courts and from the angry mobs. Out of this, over 1,200 incidents have been documented in the past decade alone. Religious radicalism is the driving force behind the lynchings in Pakistan. Groups like the TLP are no longer the fringe. They are part of the mainstream. Their growing presence threatens the stability of Pakistan. Let's now talk about the other crisis in India's backyard, the economic Armageddon in Sri Lanka. There is no end to the suffering of the people. Prices of essentials from bread to petrol were hiked once again. Sri Lankans are furious. They are taking their anger to the streets. Take a look. These protesters are marching to Colombo. They are supporters of an opposition party. They began a 3-day, 35-mile-long march this week. The reasons are obvious. They want the Rajapaksas to quit.
A large number of people who never took part in protests before are gathering across the country, especially at Golface, to express their anger. What we have to do is to go beyond the protests and form a government that will develop the country's economy, maintain the supremacy of the law. A government that will confiscate property bought with bribery and corruption and punish them. For that, the National People's Force has built the broadest stage.
Today, the protests in Rambukana turned violent. The Sri Lankan police opened fire on the protesters. They were protesting against today's fuel price hike. 1 person died, 12 are hurt. This is what the scene looked like after the shootings. Every day the protests are getting bigger, but the Rajapaksas are not budging. Their government is out of cash, but they still want to hold on to power. Today, the Rajapaksas tried to pacify their critics. They announced the constitution will be changed, the powers of the president will be clipped, the parliament will be strengthened. Effectively, the 20th Amendment will be reversed. And that's a major concession. It was a major demand of the opposition. The 20th Amendment was passed by the Rajapaksas themselves in 2020. It was one of their campaign promises. It gave sweeping powers to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. He could appoint and fire government officials and judges at will, and this includes cabinet ministers. The president also got unrestricted power to dissolve the parliament. President Rajapaksa is now ready to give up all of this. But why make the concession? The Rajapaksas are fighting for survival. They don't have the majority in the parliament. They don't have the support of the people. A constitutional amendment seems like a small price to pay to stay in power.
Given this ground situation, Prime Minister Rajapaksa has been forced, not that he's willingly doing it. He thinks he's making a concession by saying that we will remove the 20th Amendment and bring back the 19th Amendment. We want him to actually present it in Parliament tomorrow.
But will it be enough? Is the opposition convinced? Not at all. The leader of opposition, Sajith Premadasa, has spoken out. He says the opposition will push to remove the Rajapaksas. This means an impeachment motion against the president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, and a no-confidence motion against his brother, Mahinda Rajapaksa. Premadasa also admitted Sri Lanka faces difficult times ahead and it must resort to extreme austerity. Former Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe also spoke out. He said Sri Lanka has no money left.
No, there's no money, there's no foreign exchange. It's a question of dollars, it's a shortage of dollars. Because of dollars, there's no medicine, there is no fuel. As far as food is concerned, the policy of not allowing fertilizer other than organic fertilizer has brought the food production down. Now we haven't got the money to buy the food from abroad.
Sri Lanka has no money to buy food as well. That is how bad things are. As expected, Sri Lanka has now officially filed a request with the International Monetary Fund. It has sought emergency assistance. India is helping out Sri Lanka. The Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is in Washington. She met with the IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva. Sitharaman told Georgieva that the IMF should support Sri Lanka and provide financial assistance urgently. Sri Lanka needs up to $4 billion from the International Monetary Fund to stabilize its economy. Sitharaman met with the Sri Lankan Finance Minister Ali Sabri as well. Colombo wants some more assistance from India. Here is what Sitharaman told her Sri Lankan counterpart. I'm quoting, "As a close friend and good neighbor, India will try to extend all possible cooperation and assistance to Sri Lanka." Sri Lanka's request is being considered at the IMF. A decision is expected by the end of this week. We will keep tracking the developments for you. And speaking of requests, the British Prime Minister has received one. It's from 2 prisoners of war currently held captive by Russia. They have urged the Boris Johnson government to push Ukraine for a prisoner swap to exchange them in return for a pro-Russia politician who is currently under house arrest. Who are these captives? Where did they make this appeal? And how has 10 Downing Street responded? Our next report explores.
From the videos I've seen online of Russian soldiers.
The man you just heard is Aidan Aslin, a British national from Nottingham. In 2018, he joined Ukraine's armed forces as a Marine. For the last 50 days, he has been fighting to defend Ukraine, but a shortage of supplies forced his unit to surrender. Aden is now a prisoner of war, and the Russians are using him for propaganda. On Monday, the Russian state TV, Rossiya 1, aired this video. It shows the soldier making an appeal to Britain's Prime Minister, an appeal to be exchanged for a pro-Kremlin politician being held in Ukraine.
I think Boris needs to listen to what Oksana has said. I remember seeing in the news when Viktor Medvedchuk was arrested for his political affiliations. If Boris Johnson really does care, like he says he does, about British citizens, then he would help pressure Zelensky to do the right thing and return Viktor to his family and return us to our families.
Aden Aslan is not the only one. This is Sean Pinner, a 48-year-old former Royal Anglian soldier. He fought alongside Ukrainian troops in the besieged city of Mariupol. He too was captured by Russia. He too is being used for state propaganda. Watch how.
Mr. Boris Johnson, obviously I'm Sean Pinner. A lot's gone on over the last 5 or 6 weeks that I'm not fully aware of. Obviously I understand that Mr. Medvedchuk has been detained, and we look to exchange myself and Aden Aslan for Mr. Medvedchuk. Obviously, I'd really appreciate your help in this matter and pushing this agenda.
What's common between the two captives is the appeal they made to Boris Johnson. They both sought to be exchanged in return for Viktor Medvedchuk. Who is this person? Medvedchuk is the leader of Ukrainian Choice, a political organization known to be pro-Russia. Since May 2021, he has been under house arrest. Ukraine is using him for its own propaganda. It's airing videos of Medvedchuk, asking to be exchanged in return for evacuation of Ukrainian civilians from the besieged city of Mariupol. Last we checked, neither Moscow nor Kyiv had confirmed if the prisoner exchange would indeed take place, but a campaign has begun. The families of both soldiers have issued pleas to 10 Downing Street asking for help. How has 10 Downing Street responded? With a cold shoulder. Brandon Lewis, a member of Johnson's cabinet, ruled out helping the captives, stating they never should have been there. In an interview to a British news channel, he said, "We're not going to be looking at how we can help Russia. We're looking to actually ensure that the Putin regime is unsuccessful in this abhorrent invasion. They shouldn't have been there. It is an illegal act to be there. Obviously, anybody will have sympathy with somebody who has been taken hostage. But we have got to make sure that we follow the proper processes." The minister's remarks have triggered fury. British citizens are outraged at his lack of sympathy. The onus is now on Boris Johnson to respond, but last we checked, the British Prime Minister was busy dealing with the Partygate row. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Let's shift our attention to the Pacific. It has happened. China has locked a security pact with the Solomon Islands. And with this, the PLA could get another military base abroad. The draft of this agreement had leaked earlier. We had told you about it on this show. China now will get a serious foothold in the Pacific. The Chinese Navy can use ports in the Solomon Islands, and Chinese police and security forces could patrol its streets. That is what the draft said. Today, China confirmed the pact has been signed. Listen in.
China-Solomon Islands security cooperation is open, transparent and inclusive and does not target any third party. It proceeds in parallel with and complements the existing bilateral and multilateral security cooperation mechanisms of the Solomon Islands. China stands ready to work with the countries concerned to deliver their respective strength and form international synergies.
From Australia to New Zealand and the United States, this agreement is bothering all major powers. The reason is the location. The Solomon Islands sit between a key strategic choke point. They are just over 1,000 miles from Australia and 3,600 miles away from Hawaii in the US. So China is challenging the United States and Australia in their backyard. The specifics of the deal still haven't been revealed, but the Solomon Islands insisting that military bases are not a part of the agreement. The government there says Beijing will send officials next month. The cooperation pact will be formally signed then. Neighbour Australia is worried though. Its foreign minister said the agreement could undermine stability in the Pacific. The United States is mounting a diplomatic response. The US President Joe Biden is dispatching top officials.
The White House also announced this morning Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs Daniel Crittenbrink and National Security Council Indo-Pacific Coordinator Kurt Campbell will lead a delegation of U.S. government officials to Fiji, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands this week. Building on Secretary Blinken's February 2022 visit to the region, the delegation will reaffirm the U.S. commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific as we work together to tackle the most significant global challenges of the 21st century.
The most significant challenges of the 21st century. Ned Price did not say it, but the biggest challenge of this century is indeed China. Western nations have been trying to build pressure on the Solomon Islands. Earlier, the Australian government had sent one of its ministers there. He had asked the Solomon Islands to abandon the treaty. That appeal did not work. And then the US was forced to swing to action. America does not have an embassy in the Solomon Islands. It was closed in 1993. You could say America relied on Australia to keep the Solomon Islands free of Chinese influence. According to one expert, the US effectively outsourced the regional policy making to Australia. But the deal with the Chinese has led to a rethink. The US now wants to reopen its embassy in the Solomon Islands. The announcement was made back in February. The US now suddenly realizes it needs to compete. China has adopted a rather aggressive strategy in the Solomon Islands. According to recent reports, Beijing is aggressively engaging with elite politicians and business owners in the country. That is a well-known fact. Last year, the Solomon Islands witnessed violent protests. The protesters were angry about the growing Chinese influence. As a result, they destroyed much of Chinatown in the capital city of Honiara. Despite the public anger, Manasseh Sogavare, the Prime Minister of the Solomon Islands, wants a security pact with China. Remember, in 2019, Sogavare had switched his country's allegiance from Taiwan to China. With this deal, China has arrived in the Pacific. And the US and allies must compete to keep their influence in the region. The Solomon Islands, now clearly a new battleground for the great power competition. And now the election clock is ticking in France. The country will elect its next president in 5 days. The race will be between incumbent President Emmanuel Macron and the far-right candidate Marine Le Pen. Both are making the most of the last phase of campaigning. New promises are being made. Le Pen's party, for example, appears to be toning down its anti-hijab stand. After promising a complete hijab ban in public, Le Pen's party now says the ban will be implemented little by little. Our next report tells you what that is supposed to mean.
What's the difference between banning women from wearing a hijab and banning women from wearing a hijab little by little? Ask Marine Le Pen. The French far-right candidate is hoping to become France's next president. She goes head-to-head with the incumbent President Emmanuel Macron on the 24th of April. Macron has portrayed himself as a warrior who is fighting the extreme.
To all the French who chose to abstain or vote on the extreme, either because they are angry, faced with persisting inequality, a damaged planet, everyday insecurity, the difficulty to make a decent living despite working hard, or because they feel they are not listened to or taken into account. I want to convince them in the coming days that our project is a much stronger response compared to the far rights to their scares and the challenges of our time. You can count on me.
Marine Le Pen says she is a patriot not an extreme.
Don't seek to put me in a box because I don't fit in any mold. I'm a patriot and I do what's necessary for the French people to be prosperous, to be safe, to be happy and confident about the future. And this is through the preservation of national sovereignty. Because all the crises that took place showed that there are enormous gaps, weaknesses in our sovereignty.
Le Pen has extensive plans. They include strict immigration controls, new prison places, extra police, and a hijab ban. The last one in particular has been extremely polarizing. Last week, a woman in hijab approached Le Pen. She told the presidential hopeful to leave the Muslims alone. A poll conducted in the beginning of this week found Macron enjoying the support of 56% voters. Another poll found that 50% of left-leaning supporters have not decided who to vote for, given their own candidate is out of the race. Le Pen must win their vote if she is to beat Macron. The far-right candidate has now begun toning down her hijab rhetoric. She recently said that if she wins, the parliament would have a say in the proposed hijab ban. Le Pen's party joined her in presenting a rosy picture of the future. This is David Rashlin. He is the mayor of Fréjus, and he was recently heard saying that the party does not want to attack people. All women wearing a hijab are not Islamists, he said. Meet Louis Alliot. He is the mayor of Perpignan, and he was once Le Pen's partner. Alliot recently told the media that the hijab ban will be implemented progressively. It would first be implemented in state-run services before being widened, quote-unquote, little by little. If you dig deep into the rhetoric, you would see that not for once are Le Pen and company rolling back the hijab ban promise. Nor are they limiting it to state services or promising a vote on this proposed policy. What they are engaging in is wordplay, words that they are hoping can win over French voters.
We are ending tonight's show with a story from Indonesia. The country has appointed a 27-year-old pop star as Indonesia's spokesperson at the G20. Just so that you are not confused, I would like to underline here that we are talking about the G20, the group of 20. It will be meeting in Washington on the 20th of April, and leading Indonesia's presidency will be Ayunda Faza Modya. She is a singer and actor. Ayunda is all of 27. And the task before her is to manage the messaging of an extremely crucial meeting. You see, G20 is staring at its biggest test so far. One of its own has waged a war. I'm talking about Russia, of course. When it annexed Crimea back in 2014, Russia was thrown out of the then G8, the group of 8. The same Russia has now waged a full-fledged war on Ukraine. And G20 is yet to decide how to respond. Now picture this. Come the 20th of April, you have G20 discussing Russia. There are exchanges between the Russian representative and the West, and sitting in the president's chair is Indonesia, and representing it is a 27-year-old pop star. It sounds like a joke, does it not? As a spokesperson, Ayunda will have to ensure that the world gets the right message, that nothing is lost in translation or mixed messaging. But how will she do that? Does Ayunda have any experience as a diplomat? She doesn't. Does she have an understanding of the workings of such platforms? No. How then will she be a spokesperson for a forum that represents 90% of the global GDP, 80% of international global trade, and 2/3 of the world's population? Indonesia says that is not Ayunda's job. Her job is apparently to tell Indonesians what happened at the G20, basically report on the matters relevant to Indonesians. Again, how will she do that? Has Ayunda ever worked as a journalist? No. Long list of questions short. What gives? Why would Indonesia appoint an entertainer to a G20 position? As president, Indonesia has promised to champion sustainable energy transition, digital transformation, equitable access to Wuhan virus vaccines, and strong cooperation in fighting corruption. Indonesia has listed all of this on the G20 website, but Jakarta never warned that it will be treating the G20 presidency as a joke. There was no mention either of tasking a 27-year-old singer to lead its campaign. Now, I'm not an ageist, but I believe in merit. And at a time when the world is at war, I don't see any merit in naming a singer to a role involving geoeconomics and geopolitics. What understanding does she have of trade wars or sanctions or the supply chain of oil? Ayunda's appointment is not one-off. Indonesia's President Joko Widodo has been appointing as many millennials to office as possible. In 2019, 7 millennials were appointed as special staff to the president. You see, all of this is a part of Widodo's national politics, youth appeasement, if you may. Indonesia is home to some 273 million people. More than half of them are below 35, and not everyone is happy with the president. Youth unemployment is at 14%. A third of those aged 16 to 30 are working as manual laborers. Appointing millennials as special staff, or Ayunda, to the G20 is Widodo's attempt to woo the youngsters. We will get into the international repercussions of it in a while. But even as a domestic political move, it is not the wisest step forward. In a country where the average youth earns some 2 million rupiah, the president is appointing millennial staff at salaries as high as 55 million rupiah. Most of them come from privilege, and they are corrupt. Anyway, what Widodo does in his home country is his business, but the G20 is not a forum for gimmicks. It's serious business, and you cannot have a spokesperson without the needed experience. When Ayunda held her first press briefing, one journalist asked her whether the Russian President Vladimir Putin will be attending the G20 summit later this year in Bali. Ayunda ignored the question. The organizers of the press briefing told the journalist to ask Ayunda about her personality instead. How does this even work? Now, I understand the whole idea of celebrity endorsement, of using popular faces or youth icons for marketing and advertising. It's quite an old practice. Do you recognize this woman coming up on your screen? She is actress Jane Fonda. She was appointed as the United Nations Goodwill Ambassador in 1992. The idea was to leverage Fonda's brand, draw attention to the United Nations work and missions. You can call it celebrity diplomacy. Does it work, though? Well, the jury is divided. But one thing is for sure. Now is not the time to run an experiment at a time when the world is at war. An entertainer cannot be hired to shape political and critical communication. Like I mentioned before, G20 is serious business. Time now to take a look at what else made news. Time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
3 explosions rock a boys' school in the Afghan capital Kabul, causing at least 6 casualties. The blast reportedly occurred at the exit of the school in a predominantly Shia neighborhood. Israel carries out airstrikes on the Gaza Strip in response to a rocket fired from the Palestinian enclave as tensions soar after a weekend of violence around the Jerusalem holy site. Russia calls on Ukrainian forces to immediately lay down arms and issues a new ultimatum for the defenders of the besieged port city of Mariupol to give up. The International Monetary Fund slashes global growth forecast to 3.6% this year, saying the Ukraine war is pushing inflation higher. IMF pegs India's growth projection at 8.2% for 2022. The Biden administration announces a ban on anti-satellite missile tests by the United States to reduce space debris. US urges Russia and China to follow suit. Prime Ministers of India, Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, along with World Health Organization chief, came together to virtually inaugurate Global Center for Traditional Medicine at Gujarat's Jamnagar. A U.S. federal judge has struck down the COVID-19 mask mandate for public transportation imposed by the Biden administration. The mandate requires masking on airplanes, subways, trains, buses, taxis, and other forms of public transportation, amid a rise in COVID-19 cases. South Africa declares a national state of disaster over the deadly floods on the east coast that has claimed over 440 lives and deployed the military to assist in rescue operations. Relegation threatened Cadiz handed Barcelona their second home loss in a row with a shock 1-0 win over the Catalan giants in the Camp Nou. Lucas Perez's strike early in the second half proved to be the difference, and the loss also ended Barcelona's slim hopes of challenging arch-rivals Real Madrid for the La Liga title. Golden State Warriors star point guard Stephen Curry came off the bench and scored 34 points in just 23 minutes to lead his team to a 126-106 victory over the Denver Nuggets. This was just Curry's second game following a month-long absence with a foot injury. The victory puts the Warriors 2-0 up in the first-round playoff series.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas, leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks very much for watching.
Please.